please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
The president of China, Xi Jinping, has been telling corporate big shots that China is committed to reform. And among those in the audience, Tim Cook of Apple and Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. Yeah, his Pengyao. Eunice joins us from Beijing. Eunice, I can't believe that Tim Cook went all the way there to meet with President Xi Jinping. He must have been going, oh my God, I got to meet with Xi Jinping. Who? I've got an iPhone to launch.
Bernie, I thought that you were going to be here in Beijing because these are all titans of industry. You know, Steve Schwartzman, Hank Paulson also here, so I thought Bernie Lowe, a natural fit, right? But I guess you're just going to have to get onto the advisory board of Tsinghua's management school because that's why all these gentlemen were here. The school holds an event every single year. And this year, President Xi spoke, and he said a lot of things that foreign investors like to hear, that China was going to deepen reform, that it was going to strive for a fair and more transparent environment for overseas investment. And in the state media, it's been being reported that these gentlemen said that they were very impressed by President Xi and China's overall economic achievement, and also that they pledged to contribute to China's economic development and its innovation. Now, as you know, Bernie, of course, Facebook is blocked and has been blocked since 2009. Mark Zuckerberg, I'm sure, would be very thrilled to be able to contribute to China's economic development. So far, he's not able to. Also, Apple's Tim Cook thinks of China as a very important market because Apple sells a lot of iPhones here. And as you were saying, Bernie, he does have an iPhone to launch just this week.
I was going to say, you know, to have people, I know there are others too, and it's not just about these two guys, but, you know, they're two of the biggest names, most recognizable names. And Zuckerberg and Cook are all about opening, you know, markets and free flow of information, unfettered flow of information. I can't believe that as advisors to Tsinghua University, they wouldn't be saying, you know, you got to get rid of this great firewall, dude.
I'm sure that for him it would be an investment of time, right? Facebook isn't here right now, but maybe down the line things will change. So you want to be in place. That could be a possibility. But for Tim Cook, I think that China is such an important market for them that they want to make sure that everything goes well. Of course, meeting with President Xi is going to be a good move. And it's going to be important for Apple, just because when you look at the iPhone 8 and how it's been doing, so far the sales of the iPhone 8 haven't really been doing very well in China. When you actually look at the pricing of the phones, what's interesting is that the official price, what's selling in some of the unofficial ways, it's about like 20% of the official price that the iPhone 8 is selling here. So you could already see that there's a depressed demand for the iPhone 8. Of course, that might mean that people are just casting their eyes for the Friday launch, but we don't really know that just yet.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Squawk Box, your headlines this hour. Easy Does It reports the GOP tax cuts may be phased in over several years, dampening spirit on the street as major indices pull back from their record highs. Apple bucking the trend, though, gaining more than 2%, hitting all-time record highs on reports of strong demand for the new iPhone X. And Samsung in the spotlight, expected to deliver record quarterly earnings any minute now. It's half past the hour. We are 30 minutes away from the open in Tokyo. We have SGX Nikkei futures pointing to a weaker start. Of course, the lead from Wall Street is negative 21,900. Dollar yen currently trading 113.14. Bernie.
Thank you. It does begin with our daily installment of Japanese eco data. Looks like Mrs. Watanabe is or isn't helping the economy with her personal spending, depending on which figure you look at. On a month-on-month basis, she's helping out. Household spending month-to-month, 0.4% up. Reuters poll called for only 0.1. On a year-on-year basis, though, down 0.3. Reuters poll called for a 0.7% advance. So, strong on a month basis, weak on a yearly basis. Adjusted jobless rate holding steady at 2.8 as expected, and the jobs to applicants ratio, which continues to be an enigma for this economy, 1.52. So essentially, technically, there's 1.52 jobs for every one person applying for one. bit of a skill mismatch. Companies not able to hire the kind of people that they want. 2.8% headline unemployment rate. That's got to be full employment, right? All right, Apple shares, meantime, hitting an all-time high overnight on speculation of strong demand for the iPhone 10. Emily was here last week telling us how they might be shipping half or less of the phones that they're expecting. So, Emily, I don't know who to believe. I wonder if they're planting all this misinformation out there to confuse us.
Well, I guess, you know, Bernie, we're just 3 days out from the actual phone hitting the stores, hitting people's hands. So the excitement is building. And when the actual pre-orders took place, this was just last Friday, the 27th October, the demand was very, very strong. Apple saying that it was off the charts. So Apple shares are hitting all-time record highs in intraday trade. We're looking at 168.07. This is on that speculation of the strong demand for their iPhone 10, and again, coming out on November the 3rd. They're working hard to get the revolutionary device, they say, into the hands of customers. And what we're seeing so far is the shipment times based on when you go into their website and click on the fact that you want to order the iPhone. The wait now is up to 6 weeks long. 5 to 6 weeks for the iPhone 10, and this comes just 6 weeks after they launched the iPhone 8. For the 7 Plus, just to give you some perspective here, the wait was 2 to 3 weeks. For the 6 and the 6S, it was between 2 and 4 weeks. So we're going to be watching those Apple suppliers during trade yesterday. So this is yesterday's close for a lot of the suppliers in the Taiwan market. TSMC, which makes a lot of the chips in the phones, up 1.6%. Nice 243. I believe that is a record high for TSMC as well. Hon Hai shares up 1.5%, and Largan Precision, which makes the camera lenses, the most expensive stock in Taiwan. You've heard me say that many, many times now. 5,730. AAC Tech in the Hong Kong market makes the speakers, the acoustics. So that was up 2.8% in the Hong Kong market, 141.40. So a lot of anticipation, Bernie, it looks like, as we head into the launch day for the iPhone 10.
You know, when I think of some of the things that we heard over the past couple weeks, like production glitches, remember we were talking, you were telling us how it looks like you were hearing that some of the assembly issues were presenting problems. They could be actually part of the same story, right? I mean, too much demand, not enough production, or some bottlenecks there.
Yeah, we're also getting reports in Taiwan that Apple actually asked the Taiwan suppliers to double their capacity production. So basically, get more of the phones out there because the demand is very strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, speaking of demand strong, demand also said to be strong, apparently strong for Samsung. The Q3 numbers just crossed the tape. Let's get out to June for more. June, it looks like the numbers are a ditto copy of the estimate here.
Exactly, Bernie. We are looking at a third quarter operating profit number for Samsung Electronics at an all-time record high, in line with their earlier guidance at 14.5 trillion won, beating previous market expectations and up almost 3 times what they posted during the same time last year. Revenues, however, slightly higher than their guidance at 62.1 trillion won compared to 62.1 trillion won compared to 62 trillion won that they gave us in their guidance earlier this month. And their operating profitability ratio at a record high of 23%. In terms of their annual earnings, Samsung is expecting to record 200 trillion won in annual revenue and 50 trillion won in annual operating profit. But today, just as important as these numbers, is a board of director meeting that is happening at 10 a.m. local, where they will be making the final decision on the scope and amount of the shareholder return schedule for the next 3 years. Samsung is expected to announce the biggest ever in terms of the size of the payout, in terms of their cash dividend and share buybacks. So we will be watching for updates from this conference call coming out. But all in all, we are looking at the earnings, a strong operating profit at a record and in line with guidance. Back to you.
Okay, June, let's talk to Daniel Yu, head of global strategy at Kiwoom Securities, who joins us on the line. Daniel, thank you for joining us. The numbers really pretty much in line with their previous guidance a few weeks ago, right? 14.5. So that's nothing new. Is there anything new in the update today so far?
No, I think we have to wait until the decisions of who will be the next president of the Samsung Electronics. As far as all the numbers that are coming in, it's already expected as at the beginning of the month, they have already said that they will come in around 14.5 trillion won operating profits. Most of these earnings are coming from the semiconductor divisions. Around 10 trillion one comes from. So about 2/3 of that earnings are coming from semiconductor business. And it's all about how much production increase that Samsung will decide after the new president will be proceeds.
Right, and that was the shock last time, not so much the numbers, but the unexpected resignation of the president and vice chair. Have the noises you've been hearing in those couple of weeks since then, have they soothed the market? I mean, do you feel that they have a deep enough bench no matter what happens at Samsung?
Right. I mean, I think that there's some news coming out that they might be increasing the production much faster than the market expects at this point in time. If the new president comes in, that could be Ki-nam Kim, who is the head of the SEC semiconductor division right now. He's supposed to be the right man of the President Kwan's. The overall Samsung hierarchy, he's probably the potential CEO. And he's a little bit more aggressive than most of the Minister Kwan, in the sense that if they can increase the production capacity by end of next year, then of course the memory chip price can come down quite quickly. That could be a negative news for the overall industries. But we'll have to wait and see, first of all, who's going to be nominated as the new president, and then the production schedules and how they're going to change in the future.
So, Daniel, in terms of the breakdown by business area, of course, the chip division is expected to have contributed the biggest amount to this third quarter's operating profit number. But now we're getting some conflicting views from analysts in that some are saying that this super cycle in the memory chip division will continue well into next year. But some are saying that given the NAND flash price decline that we saw during the third quarter, Samsung is going to have to find a new growth engine to keep these record numbers going. What is your take on this?
Okay. As far as the earnings are concerned, our analysts believes that the prices will not come down until towards the end of next year. The production increase will be coming in mostly probably starting at the end of next year. So for that, I think the record earnings can continue to come in over the next 2 or 3 quarters. Of course, if we expect that production coming in a much faster speed, then of course, as you said, the super cycle might end. But at this point in time, we're not really sure because we are all looking into a super cycle of demand that's happening. We've been talking about this IT super cycle, especially the memory super cycles, since the beginning of last year. And if this continues on, and we do think that it will definitely continue on until the earliest third quarter of next year. So far, I think that the prices are still undervalued. But as you said, we have to watch out in terms of how much production capacity increases are happening versus the demand increase that's already we've seen.
Okay, and in terms of the management situation at Samsung, so people are saying that there is a management vacuum at Samsung now with Kwon Ho-yeon and both Kwon Ho-yeon and J.Y. Lee out of the picture. And some reports are saying that the future strategy office, so the control tower at Samsung, may be coming back. What is your take on these reports?
I think that it will. I mean, given the fact that the new presidents are coming in, is really the question mark is whether or not they're going to start the chicken game again and trying to diminish the market share of other players such as Taiwan makers or U.S. or other countries. It's all depending on what Samsung does in terms of the production capacity increases that they've been talking about. If the current management case and the current situation is that they're implementing much slower speed of the production increases. But if the new the management comes in and they decided to be much more aggressive and competitive in terms of this business, then they will start the chicken game again and trying to reduce the other players' market shares. I don't think that they will implementing that kind of strategy, given the fact that they're already making a very good profits, and they already have. I mean, Samsung as well as Hynix have market share of over 50% at this point in time. I think that trying to do additional chicken games on top of this will be taken as more like too aggressive. So. Yes, the new management coming in is very important. The question mark is whether they're going to increase the capacity faster. But I think at the end of the story, they will enjoy this super cycle much longer than most of the market people expecting right now.
Gotta love super cycles whenever we get them in hand. Daniel, thank you so much for joining June and me. Really appreciate it as usual, my friend. Daniel Yu, Kiwoom Securities, joining us on Samsung. Netflix is pulling the plug on its blockbuster House of Cards. This comes a day after the star of the series, Kevin Spacey, became embroiled in a sexual misconduct scandal, or allegations thereof. The show's upcoming 6th season will be its last. Netflix and the show's production company issued a joint statement saying they were deeply troubled by actor Anthony Rapp's allegation that Spacey had made advances toward him back in 1986 when Rapp was just 14 years old. Dobre utro on one side, ni hao on the other. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev kicks off his China visit today. He'll be meeting President Xi Jinping, Premier Li Keqiang, other senior officials as well. All underlines growing bilateral ties between the two sides with a focus on key regional and global issues such as, of course, North Korea, cross-border cooperation, implementation of major infrastructure projects, Belt Road Initiative, etc. Et al. Let's bring in Sri for much more on this. Sri, it's going to be like a homecoming. It's going to be a meeting of minds, former Soviet-era powers once again, right?
You can say this, and I think this is Moscow continuing to build on its look east policy, and I think you're quite right to highlight North Korea as an area of common concern. And I think the way that a mutual containment policy is really going to be expressed here is that Moscow and Beijing will probably continue to lean heavily on the US and South Korea to tone down the military drills and also express their displeasure and express their opposition to the THAAD missile defense system. So this is what the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi calls stopping both the US and North Korean trains. So that's North Korea high on the agenda. And of course, economically, Belt and Road, as he said there at the top, Bernie, is going to be another area of mutual cooperation. But I would hasten to add that concrete deliverables will probably be in short supply at this stage in the dialogue. If we are talking about opening up a 21st century trade route, rail, of course, is going to be a big part of that. Beijing will no doubt be footing the bill for the physical infrastructure. But the way I see it, one of the biggest stumbling blocks here is the thicket of regulations, economic policies, and also political relationships that really characterize Russia and the post-Soviet states. And remember, the Belt and Road land route does go through a number of these states. Kazakhstan, for example, is the buckle in Belt and Road. And diplomats even have a term for this, Bernie. It's called realpolitik. So perhaps the Russian Prime Minister, when he does visit the leadership in China, in Beijing, can offer some assurances that the path forward will be smooth.
I like it. Realpolitik, kind of an old twist on new things and new priorities, meaning infrastructure. Sri, let's talk to Zach Whitland with the Eurasia Group, who's kind enough to stay back and join us from Washington, D.C. Zach, thank you for joining Sri and me. How tangible is this Look East policy? I mean, it's right now, it sounds like a great idea, but I mean, how tangible is it? How quantifiable is it? Is it actually paying dividends for China and Russia?
I think that we're really in an early stage if we're going to be talking about Russian cooperation as part of the Belt and Road Initiative here. Certainly, Russia is quite keen on attracting Chinese investment into infrastructure projects and in other parts of the Russian economy in general as a means of supporting lost investment and dealing with the fact that Russia's oil-based growth model overall has really expired at this point. Russia's looking at maybe 2% growth in the medium term, perhaps even the term longer than that, and desperately needs foreign investment to begin diversifying its economy and begin powering it past that period of what could be really a moment of stagnation for Russia here. Now, Belt and Road, however, it faces a major stumbling block, which I think goes beyond some of the points made before. It's really the question of who the end buyer is going to be and whether many of these projects are going to be commercially viable. We have these grandiose visions of railways of railways and other logistic hubs connecting different parts of the Eurasian continent. And yet, in the longer run, we're not really sure if you can make an economic case for each one of these things here, which means that for the time being, it's politics that's going to be driving it.
Right. You obviously, the Belt and Road Initiative, or at least the concept, has been with us for some time. Have you folks at the Eurasia Group been able to pin some numbers, some ruble or renminbi numbers onto, what Belt Road, BRI, is actually going to do for Russia?
So Belt and Road in general is a concept that doesn't really like concrete numbers at this point in time. I've heard a number of them thrown out. I know that Kazakhstan is actually supposed to be one of the largest beneficiaries. The last number I heard tossed out some time ago is that there would be some $17 billion worth of projects here. In case of Russia, it may actually end up being less, with the caveat that anything that the sides really want to count as part of the Belt and Road Initiative could go in there. If they really wanted to, they could count the area that is seeing the greatest success between Russia and China economically, and that's simply pipelines and oil and gas trade, and perhaps increasing numbers of certain Russia commodity and raw material exports, maybe agriculture in that extent. All that can be Belt and Road if they really wish it to be, if they need to find some area of greater success here. But I think the way in which to view it is kind of a statement of intention, of a vision of connecting these parts of the world and seeing an avenue, I think especially for Chinese products to make their way through and beyond these countries here, with the quid pro quo being greater Chinese investment. For the time being right now, the situation is still that Russia has gas and China has cash.
Zach, I thought you made an absolutely critical point there when you said that Beijing could very well prioritize strategic imperatives ahead of commercial viability. So herein lies the risk. And could we also potentially see territorial disputes that could even make what we are seeing right now in the South China Sea look like a teacup? Is there no shortage of risks here that we have to be cognizant about?
I think that China greatly appreciates some of the security sensitivities in areas like Central Asia, in which Russia historically has been a dominant security power here. And I don't think China is going to be in a hurry to exacerbate some of those tensions. So I would think of that as being a very long-term risk, but one in which I think the flip side is that China may find itself at a certain point not really having a choice in that regard. For instance, if a security risk arises, say a border dispute or perhaps something worse, perhaps a risk related to returning ISIS fighters or unrest in areas closer to China's western provinces, then China may be forced to take a more active role if it sees that its partner countries are not able to respond to its own level of satisfaction for protecting its projects and its interests in that regard. So perhaps a low-level risk, but one in which is worth keeping an eye on.
Okay, now another batch of economic numbers just to keep in mind here. Industrial output for September shrank 1.1% on a month-to-month basis. That's better than the 1.5% down that Reuters had expected. That was the fastest deterioration, though, in industrial output in some 4 months. Elsewhere, more details from Samsung in their update here. June, they say they're expecting to expand shareholder returns by 100% in 2018 versus this year, 2017. Whoa, that sounds like a really lofty goal. I wish them luck.
Exactly, Bernie. That is the latest that we're getting out of Samsung in terms of their shareholder return policy, at least for next year. And in just about an hour's time, there's going to be a board of director meeting where the directors will be making the final decision on their shareholder return size and schedule for the next 3 years. For the time being, we are getting updates from Samsung regarding their cash dividend for this year. So far, the third quarter dividend payout amount is 7,000 won per share, almost 1 trillion won in terms of the total size of the cash dividend. And Samsung Electronics will also be buying back 712,000 common shares and 178,000 preferred shares, which is in total about 2 trillion won worth of their shares. In terms of the breakdown, we are getting their breakdown by business area for their earnings for the third quarter. Their smartphone division, of course, much better than expected in terms of their operating profit number, a rebound from the same time last year by more than 3,000% year-on-year. But of course, the focus is still on the memory chip division. 3.2 trillion won was the memory chip business's operating profit, the profitability ratio, which surpassed 50% in the past quarter. And in terms of the operating profit number, 10 trillion won, which is up 38% year-on-year. This is the first time ever that Samsung's memory chip division has hit the 10 trillion won mark. This is almost more than actually 2/3 of the entire company's operating profit number. And going over to mobile, again, a 3,000% increase year-on-year, and the operating profit at 3.3 trillion won. So we'll be watching for a reaction in the stock, but so far we are looking at a lower start for Samsung Electronics and a lower start for the Korean markets. Squawk Box will be right back with the opening numbers for Seoul and Tokyo. Stay with us.